Okay, good. Page 1050. We're going to go from there. It talks about various problems that there are, people who can get married, people who can't get married, and then it moves on to something a little bit different. Verse number 4. Lo yavo Ammoni Moavi b'kal Hashem, gam do asiri lo yavo lehem b'kal Hashem ad olam. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's telling us, various physical restrictions there are for getting married, people that have various physical ailments, what they can't, and then all of a sudden it moves into something else altogether, and it starts talking about the Ammonites and the Moabites. And it says that they're not allowed to be brought into the congregation of Hashem. That means that they can't convert. You can't get married to somebody who's converted from the Ammonite or the Moabite nation. B'kal Hashem, gam do asiri lo yavo lehem. Even a 10th generation. Right, so we're talking about, this is a very serious restriction. Ad olam, right, never, finished. They're out of the picture. Verse number 5, right, just to preempt the question which none of you are asking, which is why? What's so terrible about what they did? Al davar asher lo kidmu etchem belechem uvamayim b'derech b'teitzchem mimitzrayim. Because when we came out of Egypt and we got towards the border of Israel, so the Moabites and the Ammonites, they didn't come out and greet us with water and with bread. Food and drink. If there's one thing that's going to get a Jew going, it's food and drink, right? So Kodesh Baruch Hu is obviously Jewish because he's saying, fine, these people can try to slaughter us, they can try to wipe us out. There's no restrictions, for example, for Amalek to convert and to become a part of the Jewish community, right? But somebody who doesn't give you food and drink, he's out. That's it, finished. We don't want anything to do with him, right? The Gemara learns out a whole thing over here because it says that the obligation was on the men to bring food and drink to the Jewish people when they were coming through. Therefore, this does not include women. Why is that important? Let's see who's thinking. Anyone thinking here? Why would that be important?
You can have like a Jewish Ammonite.
Keep going. Concentrate on the Moabite as opposed to the Ammonite. That's a little bit of a clue. If anybody is aware enough, but Ruth was a Moabite, and there was a whole discussion at the time. I don't know if you remember Megillus Ruth, but over there it says that Boaz comes and he tells the closer relative that he has to redeem the fields of Boaz and he has to get married to Ruth, and he says, I can't do that, because there was a whole discussion over there, a whole argument going on about whether this verse is referring to only men or it's referring to women as well. If it's referring to women, then Ruth can't convert however much she wants to. She can't convert. She's a Moabite as well. Why has that got some pretty serious repercussions? Because Boaz marries her, and out of that union comes their great-grandson is King David. Right? Which means that, that's a pretty serious blot on his pedigree if they're going to come to the conclusion that it's talking about not just men, but it's talking about women as well. So the final conclusion of the Gemara is that it's talking only about men and it's not talking about women, because it was incumbent upon the men to come out and greet the Jewish people with food and drink, and it's not something that you would expect the women to do. There's perhaps a slight lack of modesty over here. Good, okay, very good. So far, so good. The second part of the verse, though, is now going to put everything back into the realms of confusion. What does it say? It says that we're not allowed to allow a Moabite or an Ammonite to convert and become Jewish. Why? Because they never came out and they never gave us food and drink. So that should be the end of the verse. No, we're done. We're finished with them. No? No, says the verse. V'asher socho alecho es Bilam ben Bo'or miftor aram na'arayim liklaleko. And also, by the way, because they hired Bilam to curse the Jewish people. Now, again, if you remember the Parsha of Balak, so over there you'll know that Bilam comes and he tries to curse the Jewish people. He tries over and over and over again. What he's trying to do is to destroy, to uproot the Jewish people. So here, I have just a little question for you, because I don't think you could take anything bigger than that. But which sounds worse to you? The fact that the Moabites and the Ammonites didn't bring, tea and sandwiches to the Jewish people as they're passing through, or the fact that they hired some major league sorcerer to try to uproot them and destroy them and to obliterate them? Huh?
Sorcerer, sandwiches.
The cup and saucer, what did you say?
Sorcerer.
Oh, the cup and the saucer. Okay. I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? So fine, so they didn't give us tea and sandwiches. No, we managed, right? We got through that. But to go and to hire somebody to come out who's going to destroy the Jewish people through his curses, so why on earth, surely the verse should say that they're not allowed to marry, that they're not allowed to convert into the Jewish nation. Why? Because they hired Bilam. We don't need to know anything about the tea and sandwiches, right? It sounds so minor. It sounds like, it really, yeah.
It's like insult to injury, no?
Okay, insult to injury. So if it's insult to injury, let's put it the other way around at least, right? Which means put in the worst thing first. And then also, by the way, you didn't bring us tea and sandwiches. Right? You hear the problem?
Yeah.
Which, however you swing it, either the first part shouldn't be there at all, or it should be the second part, and the first part obviously needs to be the problem with Bilam. Yeah.
No, it's just that hospitality is like a huge moral defect. If they hired Bilam, then they're like sticking by their guts and they're saying, all right, we really don't agree with it. Here's this wicked sorcerer. We're just straightforward your enemy, like Amalek. But
Okay.
Moab and Ammonite aren't they relatives to the Jewish people?
Yeah.
And then they didn't show basic hospitality and take
Good, that's interesting. Okay. Even though what you're saying, of course, sounds a little anti-logical, I think, because at the end of the day, I would prefer to live with somebody who has a personality defect and doesn't offer me a drink when he sees me, rather than to live with somebody who is trying to obliterate me. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't have in The Hague, in the World Court, right? You don't have a department for people who didn't offer sandwiches to other people. You do have a department for genocide. Yeah.
I think that
Good.
Also, it's
There's more.
It's definitely more wrong for the cursing, because bringing bread and water out, it's quite questionable that that's such a bad thing, because it's not like 20 guys walking through a village and just bring them some bread and water. It's like, how many Jews were there?
Oh, okay, but they offered to pay for it.
Yeah, I know, but
Isaac's saying like this, it's a tremendous character flaw. Right, there is something over here, because Moab and Ammon, where do they come from originally? They are the children that were born from Lot and his two daughters. Lot, who is Lot? Lot is Avram Avinu's nephew, which means that Lot has been inculcated with the concept of chesed, that's for sure. He learnt that when he lived over there by Avram Avinu, and he behaved in a way that reflected the chesed incorrectly when the angels came to Sodom and he wanted to take them in, and then whatever took place after that as well. So okay, we've got a major character flaw, that's for sure, but still we're stuck over here with what? With the problem of the order. Right? Now we'll get back to what you're saying in a minute, because there's definitely something there as well. Yeah.
I was just going to say that because of the fact they're related to the Jewish people, that moral defect may seem small in comparison maybe to obliteration, but that moral standard applies because they've, as you said, been sort of inculcated with Abraham.
Good. I'll tell you. Let me just reinforce what you're saying.
It's almost like the no high rules against.
Oh, good. Right. Let me reinforce what you're saying. That according to the Kabbalistic concepts, Chesed left after Avram Avinu passed away from the world. It left the house of Avram Avinu, and it moved over into the house of Moab. Right, from Lot into Moab, and Ruth brings the chesed back into the Jewish people. That's one of the fundamentals of what the Malchus Beis David, of what the Davidic dynasty is all about. Which means that this small character flaw of not coming out with tea and sandwiches is something which is very, very significant. But again, having said that, it kind of pales into insignificance compared to the concept of genocide. So the Dubna Maggid, a very famous rabbi, lived about 250 years ago, came from the city of Dubna, and he was very famous for all of his parables. He would always dress things up and explain them within a parable to make it easy for people to understand. He says like this. He says, why didn't Moab and Ammon come out to greet the Jewish people with tea and sandwiches? Right? Bless you. Here, so what did you say?
Well, I said, well, it's a logistical problem.
Logistics. What are you talking about? They're going to come out with what? With tea and sandwiches for how many people? For 3 million people? For 5 million people? I mean, you know, how many sandwiches do you imagine there are? Says the Dubna Maggid like this. It's the most incredible little insight. He says like this. Where on earth, why are they, I'm not a mob, what are they going to say? What was the reason that they couldn't come out with bread and water? Well, it's going to bankrupt us, right? For goodness sakes, we're going to come with what? With bread and water for millions of people. And even if they say they're going to pay for it, but where are we going to come up with all these things from? We'll end up with no bread and we'll end up with no water. And it's ridiculous. We can't afford to do that. What is the proof that what they're saying is not true? What is the proof that what they're saying it's simply bad? It's bad midot. It's because they're bad people. Bless you. Because they're bad people, and no, it's got nothing to do with logistics. What's the proof? Because they claim that they couldn't come out with bread and water because they couldn't afford to do that. And what do? They go and hire Bilam for some enormous salary in order to destroy the Jewish people. Which means that in the chronology of how we're to understand what the problem is over here, what is the most important detail over here? That they didn't come out with bread and water. And it's a little bit of a side issue. How do we know that they didn't come out with bread and water? Simply because they are lacking in basic midot, in basic traits, basic personality traits. Because afterwards they went out and they said that they hired themselves Bilam. Don't you come and try to swing a fast one past me and say that we didn't do it because we couldn't afford to do it, because that's not true. So I'll tell you something fascinating over here. We mentioned before, right? Amalek, if a person belongs to the tribe of Amalek, then you can convert, you can become Jewish, that's not a problem. And yet if you're a Moabite or if you're an Ammonite, you can't.
Yeah, how can you become Jewish if you're an Amalekite? Because surely you have to approach the Bethel and say, I want to become Jewish.
Yeah.
And at that point, when you're not Jewish, when you're asking to be Jewish, they've got to kill you.
Oh, good
And
question.
they'll be like, I want to become Jewish, and they'll be like, okay, well,
So see what happens, right? What happens? Who moves first? If he jumps into the mikveh first, or if they chop his head off first, whoever's first wins, right? So the evidence is like this. According to one opinion, Amalek is not a genealogy. Amalek is not. It's not a physical thing. Amalek is an ideological thing, which means that a person can belong to Amalek without having any genealogical connection to Amalek. Unfortunately, yeah, the answer is yes, it can. Here, I'll give you a sort of like a more basic example, which I think everybody would be prepared to agree with, right? What's his name? Hitler. Was he Amalek? For sure he was, without any shadow of a doubt. Does Hitler, in Hitler's family tree, does he go back to Agag, the king of Amalek? No, I can't imagine for 1 second that he does. But he doesn't need to. Right? Because once you ideologically align yourself with Amalek, you become Amalek. And then the din to have to destroy Amalek is now incumbent upon that person. What about a person whose father, all the way back, father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather, they're all direct descendants of Agag, but he wants to convert and he wants to become Jewish? What's he proving? That he's not a part of the ideological dimension of Amalek. I'll bring you a proof to what I'm saying. The Gemara says that the Bnei Bonim of Haman, the grandchildren of Haman, learnt Torah in Bnei Brak. So I don't know, maybe that was God's, ultimate revenge that they had to go and live in Bnei Brak. I don't know, right? But the bottom line is that what do you mean they learnt Torah in Bnei Brak?
Where Haman's grandchildren.
His Bnei Bonim. It's like a euphemism for his descendants.
Oh, fine, but didn't weren't his children hung?
Some of them.
Oh, some.
He had masses.
Oh, fine.
He was a prolific person, this Haman, right? I mean, Mitzvah Hashem, if you're around when we get to Purim, we can talk about, what Haman and what he stands for and what happened over there exactly. But the bottom line is, right, that it says already in the Gemara that Bnei Bonim of Haman, that his descendants learnt Torah in Bnei Brak. How can that be? They come from Amalek. Of that, there's no doubt whatsoever, right? Haman is a direct descendant of Agag, and Agag is a direct descendant of the original Amalek. Because by learning Torah in Bnei Brak, what are they proving? That they don't belong to Amalek anymore. They've removed themselves from the ideological Amalek, and therefore they've removed themselves from the mitzvah to eradicate Amalek. It's not got nothing to do with them. Yeah.
Then why did Hashem tell King Shaul
Yeah.
to kill their livestock, their children, their women, every single one?
Every single thing, because there's a mitzvah to eradicate Amalek mitachas hashamayim, right? To eradicate them entirely.
And what's the problem with the animals and their livestock?
Oh, so over there it says already in the commentaries it says that they were very famous magicians, sorcerers, the people of Amalek, and some of them, when they saw the way the battle was going, they turned themselves into animals to hide themselves. So in order to avoid the problem altogether, so destroy them all. But you should know something. I mean, you know, as Jews, we're somewhat sensitive to the concept of genocide. And yet here it seems that we're being told that we have to eradicate Amalek, right? You know, get rid of them entirely and everything that goes together with men, women, children, livestock. I mean, I can understand why you got to wipe out the people, right? But, you know, what's wrong with the Amalekite lamb chops, for goodness sakes? But apparently you can't have those as well. So the Chassam Sofer, one of the great later authorities, explains that Amalek is the physical manifestation of the Jewish nation's spiritual level. Which means the closer we are to God, the more spiritual we are, the more Jewish we are, the less power Amalek has. The less Jewish we are, the more power Amalek has. Bless you. Which means that Amalek is not an entity that exists in and of itself. Amalek is an entity which exists to counterbalance the Jewish people. The less attached we are, the stronger Amalek becomes. But you hear Pshat, the less attached we are, the stronger Amalek becomes. Says the Chassam Sofer like this, most incredible idea. How do you eradicate Amalek? What are we supposed to do? It's not going out and taking a sword and chopping people's heads off. That's not the way to do it. But rather, if the Jewish people do tshuva, by definition, Amalek will cease to exist, which means there'll be no men, there'll be no women, there'll be no children, there'll be no livestock, because we will have eradicated the power of Amalek by returning ourselves to God. It's a pretty damning indictment on the Jewish people, right? When you look around and you see all the Amalek, all that Amalek power that exists today, and we have to understand where it's coming from. Now, I'll tell you something else. I'm going out on a limb over here, so you know it's a little bit radical what I'm about to say. That's a more obvious dimension of Amalek, the physical danger of Amalek. But there's another dimension as well, which is the ability to destroy the Jewish people's connection with God, not through physical fear, not through the threat of annihilation, physical annihilation, but perhaps through the threat of spiritual annihilation through assimilation, which is something that needs to be a cause of real concern. Yeah.
I heard that Amalek attacks the idea of Brit. Is that true? Or?
Amalek attacks the idea of Brits.
Something along those lines. I might have been wrong.
I don't know.
So wait,
I don't know. What Amalek are attacking, what it says over there in the Parsha, at the end of this week's Parsha talks about Amalek. It's talking about Asher Kolcha B'derech, that Amalek believes in the concept of random chance. Amalek, in a sense, are the first atheists in the world. They're coming along and they're saying that there is no God, there is no one that's directing, there is no one who's making sure that the world runs the way that it's supposed to run. It's all really just random chance, and therefore you don't have to be concerned. I'll tell you something fascinating. It says like this, if we go back to the Parsha, way back, that it says that Moshe Rabbeinu went to fight against Amalek. So he says to Joshua, Machar, tomorrow you're going to go out and you're going to go fight. Which is a bizarre thing to say, because Amalek are there right now. And yet, what is Moshe Rabbeinu saying?
every day we're fighting.
Tomorrow. Go out tomorrow and fight. In the story of Purim, when what's her name? Esther is told by Mordechai that she has to go in to Achashverosh, what does she say? She says, fast for me for 3 days and 3 nights and then I'll go in. Now you would expect Mordechai to say, cut it out. You got to go in now. What does Mordechai, bless you, what does Mordechai say? Okay. And then she goes in and she invites him for a tea party. And then what does she say at the end of the tea party? It looks like she's got Achashverosh eating out of her hand, right? And what does she say? Come back tomorrow. There's an Indian of tomorrow. What is tomorrow? Amalek does not believe in tomorrow. What is tomorrow? Tomorrow means it's a future. Tomorrow means that there's something to plan towards, right? Tomorrow means that there's some kind of greater plan that exists that I'm not necessarily privy to. Amalek is very much a concept of the here and now. You know, eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. That's really what Amalek is standing for. What does that mean? There is nothing to plan for in the future. There is nothing there. Right? And that's what we have to. That's what we have to fight against. That really is what we have to fight against. I don't want to say things that are overly ridiculous, but I might be able to squeeze this one in. But you know that we live in a generation where people don't really plan for the future. Right? So you live in a generation, we live in the credit card generation. You know what a credit card is? Somebody wants to describe a credit card as being something that allows you to buy things you don't want with money you don't have to please to impress people you don't like. There's a certain amount of truth to that. Credit cards allow you to buy things without waiting. I'll worry about how to pay for it next month. I'll deal with it later, right? When I was a kid growing up, I remember my grandfather, his generation, if you didn't have any money, you didn't buy it. And if you wanted to buy it, you had to save up. And my grandfather could not understand the concept of how credit cards first came out, towards the end of his life, and he could not understand how the concept of credit cards works. How can this piece of plastic allow you to buy something if you don't have the money anyway? How does it work? I think he probably died never truly understanding the concept. We live in an environment, we live in a generation, we live in an atmosphere where you don't have to wait for anything. You can have the best and the biggest and the greatest of everything, and you can pay for it however you pay for it. You don't have to worry about it right now. I don't know, if you ask me, that has an Amalekite tinge to it. Don't save, don't wait, don't worry, have it now. My wife has cousins in America, in New York. They live in a pretty upscale part of New York, and that years ago, her husband told me that no one ever knew how much money a person had according to the house they had, because in America getting a mortgage was very easy. So you put down 10% on $1 million house, right? And the rest you paid off with a mortgage. So nobody ever knew. You might have lived in an enormous mansion, you may not have had any food in the fridge. He said, but in the olden days, the giveaway was a car, because you had to buy your car. So you had a fancy car in the driveway, so that probably meant that you had some money. If you didn't have a fancy car in the driveway, it probably meant you didn't. He says, now with leasing, even that you don't know. A person can have a Rolls Royce in his driveway, right? You've got no idea what he does and what he doesn't have, because all he's doing is he's paying like $400 a month or something to have this fancy car, and it doesn't mean a thing. We live in a generation, we live in an environment where the concept of preparing for the future is something which is, it's not completely alien, because everyone's always obsessing about retirement funds and everyone's always obsessing about not having enough in them for the time when they retire, but it's disappearing, bit by bit it's disappearing. And that definitely is something that Amalek is, that's part of the Amalekite ideology, to distract us from what needs to be done. So I'm telling you straight out that the physical and the spiritual mirror each other, which means that if we live in a physical world where these things are happening and we're beginning to lose our connection to the concept of saving for the future, then that means that in the spiritual realms we're losing it as well. So we're lucky. We have a spiritual auditing once a year when it comes to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. But you've got to be connected enough to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to be able to go through it and reach what needs to be reached. Otherwise, it's just one of those high holidays that you have to turn up in shul for. That's all. which for a lot of people, that's exactly what it is. Again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not belittling the very fact that they come to shul is something fantastic. But if the person's already coming, let's try to instill in them an understanding of what they're there for.
I don't really understand, because it's saying, to eternity you cannot marry these people.
Yeah.
You shall not seek their peace or welfare all your days forever. I mean, it's quite clear what they're trying to say here. And I just wonder whether and how that accords with everything else that Judaism preaches.
Yeah, you're right.
Forgiveness and love and all this stuff.
You're 100% right. It does not shtim at all, right? Here, I'm not going to hide anything from you. We try to paint Judaism as being a humane religion. It's a very thoughtful, very kind religion. And yet all of a sudden we trip over things on the way. So we trip over Amalek, and we trip over verses like this where it's saying that these people cannot be forgiven for what they've done. So how are we supposed to deal with something like that? So I'll tell you something, I don't think it's going, I don't know if you're going to find this satisfying, probably not. But when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells you to do something, then at that point all the preconceived ideas that we've got and concepts are no longer applicable. So here, it's a complete and absolute paradox. Is Judaism a humane religion? Yes, it is, 100%. Is Judaism a kind religion? Yes, it is, 100%. Is Judaism a thoughtful religion? Yes, it is, 100%. Does HaKadosh Baruch Hu command from us to eradicate Amalek? Yes, he does. How does that fit in with everything that we've just said? I tell you, the truth is it doesn't. It sits above that. It's something which is not. It's not something which can be put into the larger dimension of what Judaism is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying like this, and under normal circumstances, this kind of behavior is completely and absolutely unforgivable. Here, last week's Parsha, all kinds of halachas that are learned. You go to war, right? You know that when you go to war, talking about biblical wars over here, right? When you go to war, you know what you have to do? You're going to lay down a siege. That was a standard procedure. You know how Jews laid down a siege? On 3 sides. Like, are we morons or what? What is the function of the siege? Is to get the people inside of the city to the point where they're not able to defend themselves, and then you can just go waltzing in, take the city over, right? Put up a blockade and don't let anything in and don't let anything out. Says the Torah, no, you've got to make 3 sides. Why 3 sides? In case anybody wants to leave, they should be allowed to leave. Like, are we Jewish or what, huh? That's ridiculous. Of course it's ridiculous, but that's the way that we're supposed to do it.
If it was independent from God, and when we'd see stuff in the Chumash that we might not agree with, we'd say,
okay,
God said this was good because he thought it was good, but now it's a bit different or whatever.
But I think that's slightly different from the phrase that you just used, though. The phrase that you just used before is a phrase, I'm not quite sure how to differentiate between the two. But I think the bottom line is like this, right? That good and evil being independent entities is something which is alien to Judaism. It's a Zoroastrian belief that was incorporated into Christianity. It's something which is prevalent in the Western world in all different kinds of shapes and sizes. But we believe that God is the source of everything. That includes good and that includes evil. And it's all there in order for us to be able to choose whether we want to do good or whether we want to do evil. That's part of what we're here in this world for. So, again, how's this for a little bit of a paradox? But evil is something ultimately which is very good because it gives us the opportunity to choose between the two. Of course, the problem with evil is what? That some people choose to be evil, that's the downside. But that has to come. That's part of the territory of what free will is all about. Which means that, that there's the Maharal says the most incredible thing. He says like this. He says that on every day of the creation it says it was good. Except for the second day, but it says it twice on the third day, right? Just to even it up. But it says Vayah Tov, it was good. And then when it gets to the end of the creation on the 6th day, it says Vayah Tov Ma'od. very good. Says the Maharal, the great Maharal from Prague, lived about 400 years ago, one of the greatest Jewish philosophers that ever lived. Says the Maharal, what is the difference between Tov and Tov Ma'od? So he says, Tov is a Yetzer HaTov, and Tov Ma'od is a Yetzer Hara. That's the evil, the bad. What's he saying? What makes something, what's the difference between good and very good and very, very good and excellent?
Someone's perception of different.
Perception.
Yeah.
Okay, that's definitely one thing, but what are you perceiving?
The way that you see that situation.
The way that you see that situation. So the minute you've got something which is very good, so what originally was good is not enough anymore. It needs to be very good. And if that's the case, that's what the Yetzer Hara gives us the ability to grade
Same
things.
as evil. You might think something's evil, and I might not agree with you that it's evil because it's through my own perception of evil.
It's bad, but it's not evil, right? It's rare to find a disagreement where somebody says something is evil and the other one says that it's good. But, again, it's the same thing. Gradations of evil, where does that come from? So that comes from the Yetzer HaTov, right? What stops something from being absolutely evil? Because it's got a little bit of good inside
One
of it.
second, I don't know how that can come from the Yetzer HaTov.
Here, listen. What stops something from being absolutely evil? Because there's a little bit of good inside of it.
But then you're looking at a situation from your Yetzer HaTov and what you're supposed to judge people and.
I'm talking right now completely on a philosophical level,
Fine.
without any kind. I'm not using any kind of some kind of a manifestation that we can use over here to work it out. I'm just saying in philosophical terms. If something is good and something else is very good, that means that the very good is your ability to be able to gauge, and that ability to gauge comes from the Yetzer Hara. Because I see in the good, I see that it's not perfect. If it's not perfect, then that means that there's more there. You can go to very good, and you can go to very, very good, and you can go to excellent as well. The opposite, the other end of the spectrum is something is bad, but it's not very bad. That's because the bad has got a little. I can see a little bit of good inside of there. Those are the mamish. That's mamish the gradations of free will. Right, that's why, how often do we do this? We'll do something we shouldn't have done because it's not so bad. We've all got our red lines, right? Which means this person will do this, but he would never do that.
It says in Mishnah Rosh Hashanah that it's very important that there's 2 times during the exile that the shluchim, the messengers who used to tell people about the new moon, they can break Shabbat. And that's on about Rosh Hashanah Nisan and Rosh Hashanah Tishrei. Why? Because those are the 2 Rosh Hashanahs when in that month you've got an opportunity to get kares if you get a date wrong. Nisan, if you get the date of Pesach wrong and you eat chametz on Pesach, then you're kares, which means that you're cut off from Hashem. And Tishrei, if you eat or drink on Yom Kippur,
very good.
Then you're also correct, you're cut off.
Aye, but we know that it's forbidden to transgress Shabbos. We all know that, right?
Yes, but you're allowed to transgress Shabbos and all that. No, so this leads me to this point. It says, it's talking about how they didn't give bread and water, and as a result, you shall not seek their peace or welfare all your days forever. Does it relate to the fact that bread and water are the 2 things which twice a year give us an opportunity to get kares, and seeing as they did some transgression relating to bread and water,
I don't know.
They are kares from us and God?
That's a fascinating idea. I don't know. I've never heard anything like that before, but you know what? It's fascinating. It really is. Bread and water of Yom Kippur and the bread on Pesach. I don't know. It's an interesting idea. Yeah.
If your wife embarrasses you when you're in a fight, you should cut off her hand, and your eye shall not show pity. So in this situation, you've been embarrassed, and it's a woman, you cut off her hand. Whereas on 1053, she's getting a woman, a wife, is getting embarrassed because I can only assume it's rather embarrassing to be taken to the, what does it say, to the elders of the city, to the gate.
Yeah.
And your sheets are spread out.
Yeah.
I mean, are these double standards here for men and women?
Okay, here. So first of all, no, it's fine. The question's a question. It's all to do with semantics, actually, which means like this. No one's cutting off anybody's hands over here. Right? There's a very famous phrase, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, right? Which the Gemara learns straight away that it's talking about monetary issues. It's not talking, that if you poke somebody's eye out, then you have to have your eye poked out. So the Gemara wants to know if that's the case. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? I mean, you can't control certain things. You could poke out a person's eye and he could drop down dead. So now what? What are you going to do now? One person's eye is worth more than another person's eye. Right? Because the one person who had his eye poked out may be a garbage collector, right? But the person who poked his eye out is an artist. You poke out an artist's eye, then he's lost perspective. The Gemara says that it can only be talking about money, right? Ask the Ramban Nachmanides a very simple question. If the Torah is talking about money, so why on earth doesn't it just say that when you poke somebody's eye out, you have to pay? If you cut off somebody's hand, you have to pay. Hold on a second. I want you to hear the end before we apply it over here. I'm going to apply it in a moment, right? Answers the Ramban Nachmanides because a person needs to know that in a certain dimension, in a spiritual dimension, once they poked out somebody's eye, they've lost the rights to their own eye. That's what the Torah is coming to teach you, a moral responsibility over here, right? We're talking about some kind of a moral responsibility that if you damage somebody else, you've really lost the rights over whatever it is of theirs that they damaged of your own. But we don't do that kind of stuff, right? So it's going to get turned into something financial. Over here, on 1065, what it's saying is that the woman there's a certain moral responsibility over here that's going to be reflected in the language that the Torah uses. It's not suggesting for 1 minute you should cut off her hand, right? Over here in 1053, the moral responsibility is clear from the beginning. And the payments, all of the payments that are going to be paid, they're all there, they're all listed over there.
If I'm not talking about punishment at all, I'm saying it says do not. You can even just look at in the margin. It says essentially do not embarrass somebody. Then here, only a couple of pages before, that's exactly what's happening.
And he's being penalised for what he's doing with the embarrassment. He's being penalised over here before.
Right, but it does say take the girl to the gate.
Oh, so what's the pshat here? Listen here, it's important, right? It's a technical issue. The fellow who married this woman to begin with, and now he's, next morning after the wedding, he's fed up and he doesn't want to be married to her anymore, but he doesn't want to pay the ksuba payment, so he comes up with this whole thing over here. He is taking her to the gates. He's taking her to the elders in order to receive his get. It means you're going to the Beis Din, right? In the olden days, the Beis Din sat near the entrance to the city. In a public forum, right? So he's taking her in order to get the get. When the parents hear what's going on, so they go to bring proof that what he's saying is not true. So it's true that it turns into a public spat, and you know what? Nebuch, this girl, she's going to be terribly embarrassed by what's going on, and that's one of the reasons that there's a monetary payment which is made. Because what did we say yesterday? We spoke about it the day before, I can't remember, but we spoke about this idea. What is the real punishment for this fellow is what? Anyone remember? No, it's not monetary. The real punishment is not monetary. The real punishment is that he can never divorce this woman. Right? If she wants to divorce him, that's her business. But he can never get out of this marriage by himself. So you could say to yourself, if he can never get out of this marriage by himself, so what's he got to pay? What's he paying a fine for? The fine is for the embarrassment that was caused. There are 5 different categories of payments that have to be made inside of Beis Din. One of them is something called boshet. Boshet is embarrassment, which means that I can take somebody to the Beis Din, I don't know, he did to me something, and it didn't do me any physical damage. But he embarrassed me in front of other people, I can take him to Beis Din and I can sue him in Beis Din. So over here, earlier on, in 1053, that's exactly what's going on. Right? Which means that he's paying a payment, he's paying a fine for the embarrassment that was caused, and he's getting stuck inside of a marriage that he probably doesn't want to be in, but it's his own fault. Whereas over here, in the other one over here, you might say to yourself, but she had a valid reason for doing what she did because she was involved in, the fight between her husband and the other fellow. And the Torah's coming along and saying, well, everything's got to be measured according to what happened, which means the fact that they're having a fight and she did what she did doesn't detract from the embarrassment of what happened over there. You hear? Rabbi say, you hear? There are 5 different dimensions when you go to the Beis Din, right? Well, for example, any monetary damage that was done, it has to be repaid. Any embarrassment, so the Beis Din has to define how much of a fine the other person is going to get. Any medical issues, they've also got to be taken care of. Okay, here let's flip over to 1060. It's Hashem. We'll have a little look over here. Here, verse number 10. Ki sashe b're'echa meshat mu'uma lo tavar beito la'avot avoto. You lend somebody money. Or you lend him anything. It doesn't have to be money. It could be, you can lend him your lawnmower, right? You can lend him your silver candelabra, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You cannot go barging into his house to get it back. What we're going to learn over here is a series of things to do with the dignity of each person. The fellow doesn't deny that he borrowed this thing from you. The fellow doesn't deny that he owes you whatever it is, but the time is up, and you can't go barging into his house now to get it back. Bachutz ta'amod, you should stand outside. La'isha she'ata noisei voi yoytze aleches avoid achutza. And whatever he's supposed to be giving back to you, he brings it out to you. You can't go into his house. The im ish onihu, and if he's a poor guy, lo yisishkav ba'avoitoi. You can't take things away from him that he needs. Let's say, for example, I don't know, this fellow borrowed from you a pair of pajamas, right? But he's a poor guy, and this is the only pair of pajamas he's got. You can't go now and demand the pajamas back because you want to go to sleep, because if you do, then he won't have any pajamas. Which is even, again, Rabbi say, you hear what's going on over here? Of course they're your pajamas, and of course you really have every right to go back and get your pajamas back. But along comes the Torah and says, but hold on a second, you've got to take the dignity of the human being into account as well. And if it's going to leave him pajamaless, then it's better to let it remain in his jurisdiction. Hashev tashiv lo yizavoid kavay shemesh v'shachav b'sal masoi u'v'racheko u'lachat yet stokel ifnei Hashem elokechem. By doing what you're doing, it's going to be looked upon as being the most incredible tzedakah in front of God. Yeah, it's not bad, right? You're doing something which goes against the grain, and yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to look and he's going to say, that is fantastic. So here, we'll end today with another moshel. We spoke about the Dubna Magid before, right? He's got a very famous moshel. It's very sweet. It's very cute. He says like this: there was once a next door neighbor knocks on his neighbor's door, and he says, do me a favor. He says, we're having some guests come by, and I don't have enough spoons. Could you lend me a spoon? So he says, sure. Gives him the spoon. Anyway, a couple of days later, the fellow comes back with a spoon and a little spoon. So the fellow says to him, what happened? He says, this is Mazel Tov. He said, the spoon had a baby. So he says, oh, okay. And he takes the little spoon and the big spoon and he takes it into his house. A couple of days later, the fellow comes back and he says, do me a favor. He says, we've got some guests coming, and have you got a crystal pitcher? A crystal jug? So he says, yeah, hold on, no problem. He gives him the crystal jug. And a couple of days later, knock at the door, there's this fellow standing with a crystal jug and a glass. So he says, what happened? He says, Mazel Tov. He said the crystal jug, it had a baby. Look. So he says, whoa, thank you, okay. A couple of days later, the fellow comes back. He says, Tommy, he says, you know that 10-piece silver candelabra that you've got? He says, could I borrow that? We've got some guests coming. And this fellow's like, yeah, for sure. Maybe it'll have twins. Who knows, right? And he passes over this candelabra. Anyway, a couple of days go by, nothing. 5 days go by, nothing. After a week and a half, he's a little bit concerned. He goes, knocks on his neighbor's door. He says, Tommy, he says, you remember that candelabra I gave you? What happened? He says, listen, he says, I'm terribly sorry to tell you this. He says, but the candelabra passed away. So he said, what are you talking about? The candelabra passed away. Candelabras don't die. He says, well, he says, if spoons and jugs can have babies, I guess candelabras can die. Says that the Maggid Medubna are like this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us consistency. You know what it fits in? What was wrong with Edom and Ammon? What was wrong with them? They weren't consistent. That's exactly what the Dubna Maggid is saying. They say that they can't afford to come out with bread and water, and yet they can afford to bring Bilam to go and curse them, right? No. Be consistent. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants consistency from us. You hear? Like when we say that we don't have time to do a particular mitzvah, but we've got time to go and do something that we want to do, that's not being consistent. When we say that we can't get up early in the morning to go and daven, but we can get up early in the morning to go catch a plane, that's not being consistent. Which means for a lot of people here, it means that what you really need to do is to work on yourselves to sleep late when you've got to catch a plane as well. Right? Then you can get upstairs and tell God, what do you want from me? I'm completely consistent. I didn't get up for davening. I didn't get up for my plane either. I mean, the only other alternative is what? Is to get up for davening. So, you know. We're going to stop over here. Mitzvah Hashem. To be continued.